Hello and welcome back to the Perform Workshop. And today we've got something a little unusual on the bench here. This is an old school alarm clock. It's a pseudo flip clock. This is a General Electric 8132K model. This is a very common model of clock. They came in a number of different styles and fashions and whatnot. They all use the same Singapore manufactured mechanism, which is mostly like a cyclometer where the numbers just wrap around a barrel, but it's got a different kind of mechanism to it. So there is a flip function, you just can't see it. In this case, it has a good motion here. It's got this kind of fun sort of rotation to it. Not a true flip clock because it takes a little bit longer to move the numbers around, but it's still got more of an actual tile in there that's moving and not just a drum. This is an alarm clock. The alarm function is set on the far left. On the far right, the little dial there is the whirligig. When it's powered up, that will spin to indicate that the clock is running. This one moves a little bit more stiff than I'd like. It needs a more in-depth tune-up than I've ever given it. It is definitely a good candidate for restoration. In this case, it's got paint spattered on the top of the case. It's got some cracks. The plastic in the front, while it doesn't look too bad on camera here, is pretty scuffed up. I could definitely use some sanding and some cleanup and that sort of thing. I think a good polish would be nice for that. That'll really bring it back, I think. But it does work. The light is on there, and it moves about as well as you can expect for something that's been, out in the field, so to speak, for 40 plus years. I don't run this one very often. I don't really have the space to run these like I want to yet, but it's got kind of a nice look to it. This is a later model of this sort of clock. It uses a font on it that's more kind of a computery font. I assume this was to cash in on the rising popularity of LCD and kind of digital clocks as we know them today, where they're lit up with the displays that look like this. So perhaps GE was thinking people might be fooled with this one, or may want something like this as a compromise for the more digital style of clocks like we have today. But without further ado, let's take this one apart here. These clocks were built at cost, so there's not a whole lot to them beyond the 4 screws in the bottom that kind of hold them together and some gravity. There is a couple plastic tabs that hold the front panel on, but that's pretty much it. In this case, this clock only has 3 screws. It's not a huge problem. The bottom 2 here are rusty. That's probably because these were the ones that were touching a table and probably got wet over the years at some point. And ultimately, my goal is to replace these with new screws that are Phillips head that'll actually fit this thing a little bit better. This top screw here is a little bit longer than the others, and it's not nearly as rusted, probably because the little stand of the clock kept that one away from the table that it was sitting on. So with those 3 out, that's all there is to it, and the rest of the clock comes apart pretty easily here. Well, pretty easily. In this case, I was tempted to use a tool on here, but this plastic is so old and so brittle, it really should just be done with your fingers there. I found this technique here where I just kind of push down on the top. Gave me the most leverage. The case wiggles a little bit to kind of let that piece out. After that, you've got the front panel here. It looks really nice under that plastic. It's done a good job of protecting the clock face there. Once again, this just falls right out here. There's nothing to hold it in place without the screw there. And the whole mechanism is right there, just tucked away inside of the clock housing there. And it pulls straight out. There's a little lever there in the back for the alarm function, and then the cord is actually threaded through the case. So that can't be removed unless you cut the cord at either end, which I'm not going to be doing today because I'm not going to be doing any real work on the case. This is just a demo of what the actual mechanism looks like when it's pulled out of the clock. And it's a rather complicated little contraption, but it's really simplified compared to, say, a flip clock or some of the earlier cyclometers or some of those sort of things. It's just a handful of really well-engineered little parts to get the maximum amount of performance out of something that uses the least amount of raw materials, the least amount of plastic, the least amount of metal, the least amount of wires. It is definitely an at-cost kind of thing that GE threw together, kind of at the end of the flip clock era. So in this case, this is the lever here. By snapping that back and forth, pulling it out will connect it and make a direct connection to the motor, so it'll vibrate when the alarm goes off. The little wire there that goes over the top connects to the light bulb. That is literally just some foil tape that gives it that little bit of extra brightness as it shines down into the plastic faceplate there. And then in the center here, you have the drum with all the numbers. The motor is on the far right of the frame here. So you have your gears kind of on the left side, which allow the user to manipulate the time, and then the motor controls everything on the right. Moving up here, this metal piece here that I'm pushing down on, that's the actual snooze function. There's a little spring-loaded button inside the case that will push down on this, and that will physically interrupt the connection between the alarm function and the motor. So that is physically breaking the connection that would allow it to continue buzzing for a little bit. I'm not sure exactly how long it is. In this case, it lets up as soon as you release the button, so I'm thinking there might actually be a problem with this one. I'm not entirely sure. I have not used these as alarm clocks for any length of time aside to just test that the alarms turn on. They are very loud and very noisy because it's just a big piece of metal inside of there just buzzing around, which is not terribly pleasant to listen to. But it would certainly wake you up. It'll wake up pretty much anyone, I think. So these things did the job they were intended to do. And just demonstrating, this is what the numbers look like when they flip around inside here. If you look on the far right there, the tiles are actually being rotated around as they come up. So they're striking that piece of plastic there, so then they could fit all the tiles there using only a handful of them. So you don't have any shortage of numbers there, as they were able to use both sides depending on where they were positioned inside the clock at the time that is rotated to, which is kind of clever. And just a look at the bottom of the clock here as we rotate the numbers on through. As you can see, when you advance the dial here, it advances the minute dial around until it reaches the next 10 position, at which point it'll move that dial as well, connecting with a little nub on the side of the gear. I don't know what the exact technical term for that is. And then once it reaches the hour, it will then move the hour over using this one motor that's just spinning continuously to operate the entire clock, and it's accurate. It's pretty ingenious the way they made this thing work. So let's see it in action on its own power outside the clock value. Let's set this up. Well, that's pretty cool, but how about that alarm function? I have tuned this down so it won't blow out your earphones. Yeah, that'll wake you up. To reassemble this clock, it's very straightforward. Simply align the alarm lever back with the case, and the entire mechanism slides right back in where it came out from. There's really no way to do this wrong as long as the lever is jutting out the hole in the back. From there, it's just a matter of putting the various pieces back into place in the same order they were removed. In this case, the front plate goes over first. 2 screws are threaded through this, so that does need to go on first. And now the mechanism can be secured to the case, and that pretty much does it. In terms of servicing, it doesn't get much easier than that. From the mid-1970s until the early 1980s, General Electric would produce this clock in a multitude of formats, though the clock mechanism and assembly method for each of these clocks is identical. This allowed GE to produce a wide range of visually dissimilar clocks for a variety of markets while keeping their production costs low. As these were quite popular and reliable in their day, many have survived to today. This makes them an easy thing to find for enthusiasts of any stripe, and affordable compared to some other electromechanical clocks of the same era. If you've ever wanted an unusual timepiece, these sort of clocks are a fine choice. Thank you so very much for watching. If you're by chance interested to see more unusual electromechanical timepieces, check out the Flip Clock Fans website, where I and other clock enthusiasts are always finding, fixing, and restoring things from all over the world. Link is in the description.